Okay, this is another documentary from the Rogue Legends series. The last one we looked at was Katie Sandwina, and obviously Sandow's name came up in that story. But Sandow is a completely different character because this guy was not just strong. He basically understood something about the human body, image, and marketing before almost anybody else did. So, again, I am not going to stop every 30 seconds. I've picked 5 moments that for me explain why Eugen Sandow is so important in the history of bodybuilding. Let's have a look.
He offered this promise: you too could be like me, you too could make yourself perfect through discipline, through exercise, through physical culture. And that just chimed in perfectly with the needs, the concerns, the anxieties of the era.
Sandow, with his physical beauty, for many years he was held up as the ideal of human perfection.
But of course, if someone invented the six-pack, it was Mr. Sandow. He was very proportionally built.
Unlike a lot of the strongmen who worked in this era, he was not 250 pounds. He wasn't like Louis Cyr, the sort of the big, beefy kind of Clydesdale of a strongman. He was not particularly tall, about 5'8", normally weighed, I think, about 185 pounds. So he was not an overly large man. But what made him really unique was his physique.
And this, for me, is already one of the most interesting things about Sandow. Because look at what we associate with bodybuilding today: size, more muscle, bigger shoulders, bigger arms, bigger everything. But Sandow was not a massive man. They are literally saying here 185 pounds. What made him special was the way his body looked, his proportions, the visual effect. And this is where I think you can already see the beginning of bodybuilding. Strength is still important, but now we are starting to look at the body itself. Not just what the body can lift, but what the body looks like. Let's keep watching because this becomes even more obvious later.
Attila learned that two men were appearing in London. Charles Sampson, he spelled it with a P, and another man who went by the name Cyclops. Cyclops specialized in lifting heavy weights, and Sampson specialized in feats of hand strength, wrist strength. They were appearing nightly at one of the big halls in London and offering quite a bit of money to anyone who could match their feats. And sometimes, every now and again, someone from the audience would take up the challenge. That night, it was Sandow, much to the sadness of those two other men.
Sandow, when he got up wearing a dinner suit and he looked just like an ordinary bloke, and people laughed at him. But this was part of his act. He just ripped it off, and all of a sudden he had this incredible muscled body, and people were in awe of that.
But it was a special set of evening clothes that was just kind of lightly sewn together. And so when he jumped on stage and offered to perform the same tricks, Samson looked at him and started laughing. He says, "You're going to do this?" And then at that point, Sandow ripped off his evening clothes, and there he was in his stage costume as a strong man, with his Roman sandals and his jersey, his tight jersey, and everyone kind of gasped and stepped back. So that's the kind of showmanship that he was a master of.
He lifted the weights, all the weights that Samson could lift. There were 4 different feats that Samson did with barbells. Sandow matched every one. The crowd went crazy, as you can imagine.
It was the rage of the trickster tricked. He was a very volatile character, Samson was, and so he started screaming and running around and saying, "This isn't fair, this isn't fair." Sandow couldn't speak English very well at that point, so he was relying on Attila to translate for him. But he immediately won the sympathy of the audience, and And that was how it all started. If you don't have the sympathy of the audience, you're done for as an entertainer.
Essentially, it was very much akin to a modern reality TV show where you essentially come on and display your talents and you win popular acclaim. And he won this trial of strength under somewhat dubious circumstances. Undoubtedly, there was trickery on all sides, but that made it fun. And then, as you know, after that, he became almost an overnight celebrity.
This is fucking brilliant. Because honestly, what is the difference between this and social media today? Think about it. The ordinary looking guy. People underestimate him. He reveals the body. He performs something incredible. The crowd goes mad. And suddenly, everybody knows who he is. Today, this would be a viral video. 100%. And I think this is something people misunderstand about Sando. He wasn't only physically gifted, the guy understood attention. He understood the audience. He understood the reveal. That dinner suit was part of the performance. Even before Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and all that bullshit, he already understood that being strong was not enough. People had to remember you. And honestly, this showmanship becomes a massive part of who Sando was.
Sandow was a performing strongman. He learned from people like Professor Attila. He learned how to carry that pony.
I think the moment where he changed from being just another strongman to becoming the Sandow was really when he hooked up with Flo Ziegfeld. Because it was Ziegfeld, as I understand it, who was the person who suggested to him that in addition to doing the kind of feats of strength things, which so many of the men did, that he should also display his body. And so his stage act changed under Ziegfeld's direction. And so they created sort of a cabinet thing where there was a sort of black curtain behind him, and then he would come out and disrobe and pose. That was the thing that clearly differentiated him, was that he moved from just being the guy who could lift the pony or he could lift the barbell to doing these other kinds of things. And it worked because he would powder himself white, so he sometimes looked like a statue, and they were much smarter about lighting. That was a big moment for him.
He was very modern in his exploitation of lighting. He had a posing box in order to show himself off, and people, it sounds somehow unappealing, but it really did resonate with the audiences of the time.
His charisma and personality took control of almost every country in the world. They'd all heard of him. He empowered people to look after their bodies, get fit, improve their mind, and change their lives, and that's a great gift.
Sandow wasn't just a strongman. He was a living god, I guess you could say. He was a physique star, not a weightlifter. And so he was aiming for more sophisticated effects, I think you could say. He wanted to show his finesse. He wanted to show his fineness. He wanted to show his artistry.
It was about kind of putting the human body up on a pedestal and showing it as something kind of more than what Victorian Britain or the Victorian world thought of the body. And it's about changing kind of ideas about what the human body could be.
But the way he was built, people were fascinated by his perfect proportion. He wasn't particularly tall, and he wasn't particularly big and bulky either, but he was able to be very strong and to show the potential of his strength. And they talked about his muscles rippling like lianas, and essentially when he put them into gear, they were extremely impressive. But under most circumstances, he just looked like a relatively normal businessman.
Right. Let's stop here for a moment. This is where you can really see bodybuilding being born. Because before this, the question is basically what can you do? What can you lift? Can you lift the horse? Can you break the machine? Can you beat the other strongman? But now the question changes. Look at me, look at my body, look at my proportions, look at the muscle. The lighting is designed around the body. The posing is designed around the body. The presentation is designed around the body. That is bodybuilding, right? Obviously, not bodybuilding as we know it today, but the idea is already there. The body itself become the performance. And what is really funny about this is that nothing has changed that much. You go to a bodybuilding show today, lighting matters, tan matters, posing matters, presentation matters. You can have an unbelievable physique and present it badly. Sandow understood this more than 100 years ago.
In many ways, he was the first one to understand the connection between strength and health and entrepreneurship, if I can say it that way, that we could take this and inspire other people and use our stories to try to send the message to other folks that doing exercise will transform us.
There were times even Sandow succumbed to the opportunity to make a lot of money. I mean, he came out with a set of Sandow dumbbells, very famous, the little wooden dumbbells, and you would squeeze them together. There was a small spring in each of the two dumbbells you would get, and when you squeezed the spring all the way shut, it would ring a little bell. And he had a system of program of exercises that went with that had you doing curls while squeezing this thing, or holdouts while squeezing it, or overhead presses. And of course, the only thing it exercised, and that would be damn little because the springs were not that strong, would be the flexor muscles of your forearm.
One of the aspects of his magazines that made them so popular with collectors is that a lot of the magazines had fold-out courses in them.
This is Strength and How to Obtain It. It went into 5 editions, and it was basically the book that everyone bought if they wanted to do the Sandow exercises. It had the Sandow wall charts in the back. It had a place where you could write all your measurements down before and after. And it was his little red book. It was his little Bible. And everyone did the Sandow bodybuilding exercises.
But it was a personal brand, and he opened the Institute of Physical Culture in the heart of the West End in St. James's Street, where you could come and make yourself perfect like him. So he offered personal tuition, and then he worked out that he could leverage his brand, as we say in modern parlance. He used the Sandow name to set up other schools under franchise, as it were, and then mail order courses, where you could pursue the Sandow fitness regime wherever you were in the world. Hundreds of thousands of people followed that program.
He held the first bodybuilding competition, a big one, at the Royal Albert Hall, and he filled it up.
This picture was probably taken 1901. That's when the great competition was. When you go to London, you'll see. It still looks pretty much the same today, but it doesn't have a poster of Sandow out in front.
It was hugely discussed, and this added to his fame.
They were wearing leotards, which seems quite risque by modern standards. And how did you get away with it at a time when it was a scandal if a woman showed her ankles? I mean, it really was a case of double standards. Again, I think an example of his great intelligence in understanding how to make this sort of display respectable.
He began getting involved in different kinds of business ventures, which were basically what we would now call in modern management theory, he was branding himself. So there was Sandow's cocoa, there were Sandow needles, there were Sandow cigars, but there were just all kinds of products that he lent his name to that demonstrate he wasn't just a circus guy. He was much, much more than that. He had more meaning.
Sandow was on very firm ground for as long as it was about him, his physique and physical culture, and he could lend his brand to a training system and to equipment that was directly relevant to that, like the spring grip dumbbells. But he went one step too far. I think for him, the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were, was moving into the food industry and making supplements, really. Again, quite a modern idea, and making cocoa with his name on it. I think it would have been fine if he just let his brand be taken over by manufacturers. But in fact, he went into the manufacturing, and that was a completely bad decision. He didn't know anything about manufacturing. The capital involved was enormous, and it involved a supply chain, which required to be on good terms with Germany. Well, guess what? We went to war with Germany. He couldn't get the raw materials anymore, and if he did, he could be accused of being a traitor. He was German, of course, German origin, and so things unraveled.
Mate, listen to this again. Exercise equipment, training programs, books, progress tracking, before and after measurements, personal training, fitness centers, franchising, distant coaching. Does it sound familiar? Supplements or health products, a bodybuilding competition, and his own personal brand. What year are we talking about here? Because this basically sounds like the modern fitness industry. And this is why I think calling Sandow simply the father of bodybuilding almost doesn't explain enough. The guy understood the fitness business. He understood that people didn't only want to watch him, they wanted to become like him. And once you understand that, you can sell the method, you can sell the equipment, you can sell the program, you can sell the image. And eventually, apparently, you can sell the bloody cocoa. But this is also a lesson here. He went out, or he went outside the thing he actually understood: his body, physical culture, training. And once he started putting the Sandow name on everything and actually manufacturing products he didn't understand, things started to fall apart. Honestly, you see exactly the same thing happening today. An influencer becomes successful in fitness, and suddenly he's selling fucking everything: clothing, food, supplements, crypto. Oh man, it's funny because it's like this, man. Whatever, right? They sell whatever. Sando was doing he was doing this in the 19th century, or he was doing the 19th century version of the same thing. But the strange thing is how someone this famous almost disappears at the end of his life.
Basically, when the Sandow's cocoa factory went bust, big style, that was a massive financial blow. I mean, it bankrupted him as good as. And then the war came. He was, as an alien, he was badly persecuted in the war. He had to lie low.
As he aged, he took care of himself, and he still looked wonderful later in life. There's some photographs of him when he was near the very end of his life, and he still looked very fit, very healthy. He did die at only 58, but we don't know for sure. After he did live, apparently a large car, one of his cars that ran off the road, he was trying to help right it and help it get back in place, and he complained of his head hurting when he got back home. But it was a little bit of time after that when he actually did die. So there's still some question about his death.
Now, people say, how can he lift a car out of a ditch? I'm quite certain that Eugen Sandow could. But Sandow was getting on now. And although he didn't have a heart attack or anything, it certainly did affect him.
The cause of his death was probably not that he lifted a car out of a ditch, as so many people like to tell us. We all would like to sort of write our stories, and strongmen get to do that more than most. But at the end of his lifetime, the family, his wife and daughter, would not allow a monument to be erected on his grave.
This is where sometimes you think it would be great to be a novelist, because we just don't know what happened beyond the fact that he was eventually buried in an unmarked grave. And this is a huge puzzle. It's a real insult to his memory. A man who was beloved by hundreds of thousands, one of the most famous people of the time, buried like that in an unmarked grave with no record of him, who he was, his achievements. Clearly, he was estranged from his wife and his daughters. And there's a mystery around that. I mean, something happened that was really bad. And we just don't know what it was. There's a lot of speculation. He might have died of syphilis. He might have been homosexual or bisexual, which at the time, of course, would have been scandalous. We just don't know. But clearly, whatever happened was really bad, caused a major rupture with his loved ones. And when he died, he was not lamented by them.
All the reports from those periods indicate that whenever people got together, and they did a number of times, they would approach the family one way or the other, but they simply never yielded. They never wanted to see him honored in that way.
I think his actual cause of death, on his death certificate, I believe it says aortic aneurysm, which could be from a lot of things.
What we don't know is the real cause of death, and aortic aneurysm has many causes as an expression of a disease. And yes, of course, one possible explanation is that he did exert himself too much in this incident with the car, which I believe is true, that he did lift it up.
We'll never know. I mean, that's one of the things about history there, that we're not going to find those records. But it was true that she did not allow a tombstone to be erected. She was not happy with him at the end of his life.
Finally, I don't recall the exact date, but a very small marker was put up by some of his friends. Maybe they thought it was so long, maybe they didn't even ask anyone other than the cemetery. But it was a very small little marker indicating this is where Sandow's remains are.
Chris Davis is Eugen Sandow's great-grandson.
My name's Chris Davis. I live in the Lake District, northern England, and I'm the great-grandson of Eugen Sandow.
And one of the things that he did was organise for a proper memorial to be established at Sandow's grave in Putney Vale.
Since he is a member of the family, only the family can okay the erection of any monument. He found a large irregular stone in a quarry, and he had the word Sandow and Sandow's dates engraved on it. It's a good marker. It has the ruggedness and the strength that he wanted to convey from the character of his great-grandfather.
And it's substantial. It acknowledges that Sandow is there, but it took not quite 100 years, 80 years or so, before that was done.
That's actually a very strange ending, because think about where this documentary started. One of the most famous men in the world, royalty knew him, celebrities knew him, people across different countries knew his name. Hundreds of thousands of people followed his training ideas. And then he dies, and his own family doesn't even want his name on the grave. Something clearly happened. We don't know what, and I don't think that we should pretend that we know. But it is a reminder of something. The public image and the private person are not always the same thing. And honestly, this is another thing that has not changed in bodybuilding or celebrity culture. We know the body, we know the photographs, we know the post, the Instagram, the YouTube, etc. We know the performances, we know the brand, but we don't necessarily know the man. Think about this last sentence I just said. We know the brand, but we don't necessarily know the man. So, yeah, For me, Sandow is much more interesting than simply saying he was the father of bodybuilding, because he understood almost every element that would eventually become modern bodybuilding and the modern fitness industry: the physique, the posing, the lighting, the performance, the personal brand, the training system, the transformation promise, even the products. And maybe that is the real legacy. He didn't invent muscle, he didn't invent strength, but he understood how to turn the muscular body into something people wanted to look at, admire, and eventually become. And honestly, we're still living inside that idea today. This is Eugen Sandow, Decoded.